Today we are going to talk about the terrain analysis and modeling and how it is utilized in natural hazards modeling. To begin with, one fundamental term that we must understand is the DEM. But what is the DEM? It is a raster file whose cells contain the numerical value of their mean elevation. Here you can see a DEM of the area of Mani, Peloponnese, Greece, in form of a shaded relief. If we change its symbology, though, into unique values so that different elevations are shown in different colors, you can understand it better. And if we zoom in, you can better see the individual pixels. Each pixel has a different attitude. And if we zoom in, you can better see the individual pixels. Each pixel has a different attitude. We have already learned how to create a DEM and what data we need. Now we will see how we can use it to our advantage. Through the DEM and by using the tools that GIS provides us, we can incorporate various physiographical parameters in our natural hazard modeling, including first and foremost, the elevation itself. It is generally accepted that as elevation increases, so does the rainfall. Thus, if we are modeling landslides in a higher elevation, we expect to have higher amounts of rainfall and thus an increased landslide susceptibility. We can also use the tools provided by the GIS to generate other layers by using the DEM as an output, such as. On the contrary, regarding floods, it is generally accepted that as elevation decreases, the relief becomes smoother and flatter. Thus, the flood hazard increases. We can also study the relief itself. We can see, for example, the flow accumulation. This is to which directions the water will flow and where it will end. This can be used in various hazards. For instance, if there was an accident in an industrial area and dangerous substances were released on the ground, we can easily model where they will end up and approximately after how much time. Also, if we are modeling the risk of lava flow after a volcanic eruption, we can see where the lava will flow. And if we know its properties and chemical composition, we can also model the time after which it will reach a specific location, for example, a city. The morphological slope, either in degrees or in percent. The morphological slope is among the most important parameters for a significant percentage of natural hazards. For example, landslides and soil erosion are very likely to occur in high slopes and very difficult to take place in nearly flat areas. Floods operate in an opposite way. The water will easily be accumulated in a flat area, but in a steep slope it will just flow. For the coastal zone, the situation is similar. Decreased coastal slope renders a larger part of the coast vulnerable to the wave activity, thus increasing both the risk of coastal flooding and coastal erosion. The morphological aspect. This actually shows the orientation of the slopes, for example, northwards, southwards, northeastwards, etc. This is important because this indicates the effects of the weather. For example, in Greece, we know that most weather phenomena, for example storms, come from west eastwards. Thus, a west-tending slope will be directly exposed to them, while an east-tending one would be better protected. Thus, the former slope will have a great problem of runoff erosion and landslides. For the same reason, Any plain areas, fauna and its food will suffer greater from flood phenomena. Regarding wildfires, we may know that in a specific area, the wind and the period of prediction goes predominantly southwards. Thus, a potential wildfire will have a different spreading behavior according to the slope aspect. The slope visibility. That is, whether its slope is visible or not from a specific point of view or a specific structure. This is particularly important, especially when we are dealing with wildfires. We can see whether its slope is visible from an area's settlements. If a slope can be seen from many villages, it is possible that should a wildfire start, someone will see it in time, thus calling the fire department. Therefore, the wildfire may be prevented before it gets out of control. This reduces the fire hazard. If, on the contrary, a slope is well hidden, this possibility does not exist and a potential wildfire could easily come out of control. The drainage network. This too is among the most significant parameters for almost all natural hazards that are related to water or are affected by it. To begin with, we can use the drainage network to create buffer zones around each stream. We can easily understand that the closer an area is to a river, and even more to a large one, the more risky it will be in terms of landslides, flooding, and runoff erosion. Floods and erosion in particular are driven primarily by the drainage network. So it is crucial to know the distance of a location from a river. Similarly, as landslides can be caused by the water, if a slope is closer to a stream, it will be easier to be subject to landslides and/or rock falls. The drainage network can also be used in modeling coastal erosion, either directly or indirectly. Rivers erode the mountains and transport the eroded material downstreams, ultimately depositing it in the sea. This is then redistributed by the waves to create the beautiful beaches we all love. If a dam is created in a river, the beach that hosts its estuaries will no longer receive the eroded material and can be subject to coastal erosion. Through the DEM, we can have a detailed topography, including contours and drainage network. In this way, we can use the morphology of a natural or artificial channel and perform multiple hydrological and hydraulic models, which are primarily mathematical models. These models can later be used for runoff erosion and flood modeling. Moreover, we can map the hydrographic density or frequency. These two parameters relate to the total length and number respectively of streams and rivers per unit area. We can understand that, similar to the previous case, flood erosion and landslide hazard is increased as this parameter increases. We can also create the watersheds of individual basins and sub-basins and thus define the drainage areas. This is particularly important as a watershed is the natural boundary of a basin. The water flow takes place with its limits so that each basin or sub-basin has its own flow characteristics. Imagine that we're examining a soil or lake and we want to find out why they contain dangerously high amounts of a specific natural substance. This could always be owed to a river which erodes a lithological formation that has this substance and deposits it in the soil or the lake. We can then examine its basin using the watershed as a boundary. If this formation is found within the broader region but not within its basin, It is practically impossible for this formation to cause the contamination of the soil or lake, so we will have to seek another source of the dangerous substance. Let's see now some case studies. Let's begin with flood hazard. Our study area includes 3 drainage basins of South Cyprus. We used, of course, the DEM, which you can see here on your left, to generate the slope which is shown to your right. It is very clear that almost the entire lower areas, as well as a large part in the upper reaches to the northeast of the study area, are nearly flat, with inclinations of less than 10 degrees. These areas are particularly prone to flooding, regardless of whether the drainage network is well or poorly developed. Elevation was also one of the most important parameters of our model, and in fact the most important one. As I explained above, increased elevation means higher amounts of rainfall. Thus, as we move downstreams, more water is accumulated. In each location, as a total water input, we will always have the rainfall that falls over this location, as well as all the rainfall that has fallen upstream and flows to it. Therefore, as we move downstreams, the surface runoff increases, and so does the flood hazard. Moreover, we used DEM to extract the drainage density as well as the distance from rivers. We have already seen how this affects the flood hazard. Besides these factors, we also took into account the following. And here you can see the flood vulnerability map. As we would expect, the highest hazard is found in the lowermost reaches and very close to the primary river, while the lowest hazard is found in the highly mountainous areas. Now the example of surface runoff erosion for Sifnos Island, Cyclades, Greece. Runoff erosion can refer to the long-term erosion of hard rocks such as limestones. While this is very important for the geological research, it is usually not a direct concern for the society, and only rarely will its modeling be asked for. Rather, runoff erosion primarily concerns the soil erosion, which can take place rapidly and bear significant problems to agriculture, to the road network, and so on. So we use the DEM in 3 ways, as you can see here. First, to delimit the drainage basins by drawing the watersheds. As we have already discussed, we always make a natural hazard model in predefined geographical units, which could be administrative divisions, drainage basins, or even pixels or grids. In this case, we choose to work on drainage basins. Moreover, we generated the slope using the DEM. We can understand that as the inclination increases, so does the velocity and power of the flowing water. Thus, it can cause soil erosion much easier, increasing the runoff erosion hazard. Also, we created a drainage density map. As runoff erosion is produced by water runoff, the latter is expected to be higher within or very close to a stream rather than in an area with no streams. The hazard is thus increased as drainage density increases. Now a third example, this time for landslide hazard. Please note that in this case, this is just an example for you to understand the concept and not a published work. Initially, we used a slope because with increased slope, it is easier for a rock fall or landslide to take place, as it is further aided by gravity. In this case, we group the slopes in two categories, as you can see here, because statistics has shown that slopes of more than 16 degrees are more likely to be subject to landslides. We also used the slope aspect. In this part of western Greece, the wind and the weather phenomena are usually from the north. Therefore, slopes trending northwards, northeastwards and northwestwards are more susceptible to landslides. What is more, these slopes are not exposed to the sun. This means that the water is not easily evaporated, but instead infiltrates the rocks, causing them to become weaker. Therefore, we consider these slopes as highly vulnerable to landslides compared to all other slopes. We used other parameters as well, and here you can see the landslide hazard. Another simple example for you to understand from the same area, this time focusing on wildfires. In this case, the DM-related properties are not the most important ones. Wildfires are highly affected by the land, for example, the presence of forest and fuel, as well as by the weather, the soil moisture, the temperature, the wind, etc. In any case, though, the relief can affect the spreading of a wildfire. Initially, the slopes. Generally speaking, and supposing that we are talking about one particular type of vegetation cover, wildfires are easier to spread through a steep relief rather than a flat one. Slope visibility was also taken into account. The mess was already has been described. Of course, in this case, the whole area was visible from at least one settlement, so this parameter did not actually affect the final result, but in any case, it had to be modeled. Regarding Greece, its susceptibility to floods is higher compared to most European countries. Greece is among the European countries with the most flood events as well as the most severe damages, which have shown an increasing trend over the last decades, which is owed to its relief, the presence of many small and mountainous catchments and, on the other hand, major floodplains. Its Mediterranean climate, with an abundance in extreme weather phenomena, its lithological structure, presence of multiple lithologies, its limited forest cover, as well as the multiple human interventions. Flood data and records are very scarce even today. It is important to know that most Greek floods are flash floods, and despite the flood protection measures and improvements to infrastructure, floods are becoming more and more frequent in Greece. Between 5 and 9 August 2020, the storm Thalia occurred mainly due to a low-pressure system above the southern part of the Adriatic Sea and the Ionian Sea. The cut-off center in the first morning hours of Saturday, 8 August 2020, was above the Ionian Sea, and 12 hours later it moved southeastwards and over the mainland Greece, and in the morning of Sunday, 9 August, it was located over the Aegean Sea. During the night of Saturday, 8 August 2020, a low-level convergence zone developed in the central Aegean Sea, triggering convection of highly unstable air masses. The complex topography of central Greece had a significant effect on these long-lasting and stationary supercells developed due to strong vertical wind shear and storm relative helicity above area. The main flood event in Evia occurred on Sunday, 9 August. In particular, the meteorological station of Steni recorded 75 mm rainfall quantity between 23:20 and 2:40, 24 mm between 2:40 and 3:30, and 200 mm between 3:30 and 7:30, reaching a total of 299 mm. The methodology we used is twofold. A. Geomorphological observations after the 2020 flash flood event, and B. A GIS-based approach to assess the flash flood susceptibility in the studied urbanized alluvial fans. The results of the GIS approach were assessed based on the geomorphological observations of the 2020 flash flood. A field survey took place following the flash flood of 9 August, focusing on the areas mostly affected, namely the alluvial fans of Psahna and Politika. The field survey included the following. A. In situ measurements and observations regarding the water high level and extent of the most characteristic sites in the upper part, the urbanized part, and the lower part of the drainage network, approximately 1.6 square kilometers at Psahna and 1.7 square kilometers at Politika. Maximum water level marks indicating peak discharge were measured at various parts of the flooded area using a rigid folding mirror, 8 measurements. High water marks were identified by lines of dry mud on several surfaces, the presence of leaves, and other plant fragments stuck on various places, seed lines, rock, and debris lines. Qualitative documentation of damages caused by the flash floods, both at human structures and infrastructures and at agricultural areas. An RTK GNSS equipment was used with accuracy 0.2 meters in order to create topographic cross-sections perpendicular to the normal stream flow in order to determine with accuracy the topographic apex position in all studied streams. Documentation of damages using a commercial UAV. Flight elevation ranged between 50 to 70 meters for detailed photos and 90 to 110 meters for panoramic views. The route of the flights was planned in a way so that the areas of interest could be captured and a sufficient number, 80, of photographic and video material could be obtained so that the flood limit and the impacts of the event could be determined. Our results were in compliance with the previous flood events in the area. The approach in this work has shown that amongst the most critical factors in flash flood susceptibility is the urbanization of the alluvial fans and the presence of artificial surfaces covering or replacing the stream beds, which is common in the settlements of the steady area. The produced susceptibility map suggests that the alluvial fans of Politika, Poros, and Mandanian streams are mainly characterized by high and very high susceptibility. In fact, 56% of Politica and 46% of Psachna areas are characterized by high susceptibility, while approximately 27% of the alluvial fans of Politica and porous streams are characterized by a very high susceptibility, and approximately 54% of Psachna area. The adopted approach answers two important questions: where flooding can occur and how severe it can be. Similar flash flood susceptibility maps provide crucial information for the development of mitigation measures in flood-prone areas. Our study further highlights that the combination of geomorphological mapping, GIS, history of past floods, as well as post-event surveys can provide a powerful tool for the assessment of flash flood hazard.